Do you believe in God? And how would you define God? My name is Rabbi Wyne of Young Israel Aish, and I want to welcome you to Life is Great, where every Sunday morning we get together, talk about another universal value that is derived from Judaism, and show how it can improve your life and make your life the absolute best. Welcome back to Life is Great. Tell me something, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being five-finger clarity, like you know you have 5 fingers, you know this. 1 being, I really don't know it at all. How much do you believe in God? How much do you believe in God? Not only how much do you believe in God, but when you're talking about God, what are you talking about anyway? It's such an amazing thing. A lot of people believe in God. A lot of people will say, well, I don't know, maybe God exists sometimes, they don't exist sometimes. But when we're talking about God, you have to ask yourself, what am I talking about? How would you even define it? That's a difficult topic. Most people are not prepared to discuss this. And if you have young children oftentimes say, who is God? Sometimes they relate it to Santa Claus. Sometimes they think about it as a really, really big man or a really old man in there for time for trouble, not around when times are good. It's a little bit of a conflict. But we have to ask ourselves, how much do we believe in God? And what are we talking about when we're talking about God? Well, I went over to our favorite coffee bean. I asked some of you what you thought. Let's just hear a few answers, and then I'll come back and we'll discuss this absolutely crucial issue for living. Do you believe in God?
Absolutely.
Why?
Faith, trust. He's always there. I feel it.
Okay. How often are you thinking about God or aware of his presence?
At least once a day.
Just for a moment?
At times. At times, yes.
Do you believe in God?
I do not.
Is there a reason why you do not?
There's no specific reason why not. I was actually raised Christian, and over time I found myself, and I don't feel the need for any higher power in my life. I don't 100% say there is no God. I lean towards the agnostic side. I just believe in myself, and I live my life freely and with no higher power.
Okay, Stephanie, do you believe in God?
Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me? That's the question you're asking me? Wow. Is my mom going to be watching this?
Probably.
Yes.
Now let's say your mom's not going to be watching this.
I'll say this. I believe in God differently than I used to, as a child, for instance.
How would you define God?
My kids just asked me this like a week ago. And I told them that, because they thought he was a real person. And so I just explained that it was just a feeling, more of a feeling than an actual person. But yeah, my kids ask me this question all the time, and it's really hard as a parent because I grew up in different religions.
How old are your kids?
10 and 12.
Now, are they looking for a real entity or just an imaginary feeling thing to comfort themselves in times of trouble?
They were comparing him to Santa Claus, so we were having issues with that. Yeah. I try to explain it to them as more of an entity than a real person.
Great. Okay.
More of a feeling.
Okay, I wonder if you would have responded like some of the people you just saw respond when I asked you, do you believe in God? Now, the truth is, it's not even a real question. because in the Torah, if you look at the Bible, the first commandment of the 10 Commandments is, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of bondage in Egypt. And actually, the rabbis define this as explaining to us that no one really cares what you believe. The commandment is not to believe in God. The commandment is to know that God exists. Knowledge and faith are two totally different things. Knowledge is something that is based on evidence, on proof. Faith is based on no proof. It's interesting, many years ago I was in Jerusalem and I was explaining this concept to a group of people in the audience. I had a big whiteboard behind and I wanted to define the terms. I understood, people have a sense of there's knowledge, there's belief and faith. So I write up on the whiteboard, I write faith over here, and I write knowledge over here, and I say, okay, everybody, what do you need for faith? What is faith? How do we define it? And faith is, according to the Webster's Dictionary, faith is something that you believe in that there is no proof. I go, okay, everybody, what do you need for knowledge? And someone from the audience says, you have to know how to spell it. Okay. Listen, creative minds have creative spelling, right? But what is knowledge? Knowledge is something that you believe in because there is proof, there is evidence. The question is, how much evidence do you really need to know about God? Not everyone believes in God completely. Not everyone knows about God completely. Perhaps one of the great examples in the Torah of someone who did not fully believe in God is Moses. That's right. Moses, the greatest prophet who ever lived. And we define prophecy, by the way, as an acute intellectual knowledge of the will of God. So you say, if Moses was the greatest prophet who ever lived, if he had a lapse in his awareness, in his faith, in his trust, then certainly I would be allowed to have a lapse. Now, how do I know that Moses had an occasional issue with God? Because we find the story when the Jewish people are out in the desert and they're dying of thirst. It was right after Miriam died. And the well that followed the Jewish people around, it dried up. And they came to Moses and they complained. They said, did you bring us out here in the desert just to die? So Moses goes to God and says, God, help me out. And God says, okay, fine. Gather all the people around. And you'll see a rock there. I want you to speak to the rock and it will bring forth water. Well, Moses gathers all the people around. He turns to them and says, oh, rebellious ones, listen to the Almighty. He smacks that rock 2 times. The water flows out. The people are very impressed. If I was there, I would be very impressed. God was not impressed. God turned to Moses and said, Moses, you did not believe in me enough in order to sanctify my name, and therefore you and your brother Aaron will not be allowed to go in the land of Israel. See, even Moses had a moment where God said, you didn't believe in me enough. So we have to go to this issue. What does it mean to know there's a God? What kind of evidence are we talking about when we talk about knowledge of God? So first, I want to identify how much evidence do you need? That's really the first question. How much evidence do you need? So, in this country, if we were to gather a jury together, and it was in a state that ascribed to the death penalty, what do you think is the technical term? How much evidence does the prosecutor have to come up with in order for a guilty sentence and a death sentence to apply to the one who is being charged? What's it called? Anyone know? That's right, beyond reasonable doubt. Tell me something. Is beyond reasonable doubt 100% knowledge? No, it's not. So wait a second. This is what you're saying. You're saying in the country we live in some states, you can actually put someone to death without 100% knowledge that they actually committed the crime. An amazing idea? So certainly knowledge of God is not going to be that degree, but what's the minimum? What's the minimum percentage a person would need to know in a life and death situation in order to determine, to make a decision this way or that way? So I'll give you an example. Let's figure it out. We're looking for the minimum percentage point. It's not, we know that we do not need a 100%, but how much do we need? So imagine a person gets sick. They come up with a very rare disease. There's only 2 doctors who can treat this disease. So they go to one doctor and they say, okay, the doctor examines them and says, listen, you have a very rare disease, and if you don't take this bottle of pills within the next 24 hours, you are going to surely die. So the guy wants a second opinion. So what does he do? He goes to the other doctor, and the other doctor looks at him and says, well, if you take this bottle of pills within the next 24 hours, you shall surely die. Yeah, what's he going to do? Does he take the pills or does he not take the pills? One or the other. If he doesn't take the whole bottle, he's following the second doctor. If he takes the whole bottle, he's following the first doctor. How much evidence does he need in order to make a decision? And it doesn't matter what the pieces of evidence are. You might like one doctor's socks better than the other. Right? One person has a better smile, a nicer office. But which one, how much evidence does he need? What? That's right, 51%. If you have 51% this way or that way, in a life and death situation, that's enough evidence. Now, I would share with you that when we're dealing with the issue of God, it is definitely a life and death issue. If you want to talk about the afterlife, absolutely it's life and death because, Judaism, like basically every religion, every monotheistic religion that believes in an afterlife, requires a belief in God in order to get in, okay? I'd say that's a requirement. It's a minimum. So therefore, a person must stop and say, belief in God in the afterlife is certainly life and death. But I would venture to say even in this world, it's a life and death situation. If a person has a God consciousness, if they know that God exists, they will relate to others, they will relate to events, and they will relate to themselves in a different way than if a person who does not know that God exists. And I would say that if you know 51% that God exists, so then you should live your life as if you know it 100%, at least as often as you can. All right, don't go away. My name is Rabbi Wyne. You're watching Life is Great. And I'm going to come back in just a few moments and share with you some of the pieces of evidence that we use in order to make ourselves more confident that the Almighty exists and He's involved in our lives. Do you know someone who needs a little more happiness in their life? Maybe it's you who needs more happiness in your life. Yes, you've seen the Life is Great TV show. You perhaps have heard the Rabbi show. But now it's time to get Life is Great, revealing the 7 secrets to a more joyful you. This book was something tangible that you can give your friends and family, where they can keep by their bedside, take it on vacation, leaf through it page at a time or chunk of pages at a time, and each time they will learn another secret, another tool that they can use in order to get the absolute most out of life. What better present can you give your friends and family than the wisdom to live a better life? Okay, welcome back to Life is Great. So we're talking about how much evidence do you need in order to know that God exists. And then we also have to define what God is, of course. Now, in a certain sense, well, you know what? It's almost like I'm not here to prove anything. I'm asking a question and I'm telling you, I'm about to share with you proofs of God's existence. But there was a great rabbi who lived about 150 years ago, Rabbi Yisrael from the town of Salant. He said a beautiful thing, I thought. He said that to a believer, there are very few questions, and to a non-believer, there are no answers. See, the value of examining the proofs of God's existence is not so much that you're going to be able to go out there and convince somebody who does not believe that God exists, that God exists. Because belief is in God, trust in God, knowledge of God is as much of an emotional issue as it is an intellectual issue. And if a person, for certain reasons, and there are reasons why people would decide this, they'll say, listen, I want to believe that there's no God, so I'm not going to think about it, or I will deny any proofs you bring forward. There are certain people that naturally will go that way, and they will stick by their guns. The real value, I believe, of understanding the evidence that God exists is to make us more confident, make the believer, so to speak, to let him know that it's not you're not living at a wing and a prayer. It's belief in God is not for dumbbells or people that are not sophisticated. No, we have a commandment in the Torah. Know that I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. Know that God exists. Have evidence so you can articulate to your children, articulate to someone who asks why you believe in God. And that makes us more confident. And therefore, when times of need, we are more sure that God is with us. In times of joy and happiness, in times of success, then it gives us a sense of humility, knowing that my successes are not me per se, but my successes are riding on the coattails of something much greater than I. Okay, so let's first talk about how do I know that God exists? So the first piece of evidence, and there are actually 7 different categories of evidence that God exists. So, and you might you might believe in 3 of the 7. You might ascribe to 80% of 6 of the 7. But the issue is you look at all of them and cumulatively you stop and say, that's more evidence today than it was yesterday. So that's how we have to approach it. The first thing is a psychological proof. And that psychological proof is you only think of things that you believe exist. You only think of things you believe exist. It's interesting. If I tell you, I want you to imagine for a moment a monster. Imagine a monster that is like a dragon. Okay, well, I'll tell you, you've never seen a monster and you've never seen a dragon. But what does this monster look like? Well, he's got big teeth and they're yellow and they're slimy. And he's got wings and he's got scales and a tail. And he's 20 feet tall. What are you doing? You're taking pieces of visions that you've had from different pieces in your life, and you're shoving it all together into something that's very scary and uncomfortable. But you're not creating in your mind something that doesn't exist. And that is what some would say is a psychological proof of God, the mere fact that we can think about God. Now, the fact that we can talk about it means that it has to exist in some form. You understand that? It's a little piece, chew on that one. But I think the person you want to go to really look at evidence was Abraham. Abraham is the one. You say, well, how did Abraham come up with the idea of one God? Now, again, before Abraham, there were many people who believed in God. As a matter of fact, if you would go into Mesopotamia where Abraham lived, and he said, do you believe in God? They would say, sure, Abraham, I believe in the rain God, the wind God, the sun God, the moon God, the brick God. They believed in many gods. Abraham was remarkable because what he did is he ascribed to one God. He said, no. There's order in the world. And we relate to order, the distinction between order and chaos. And Abraham looked in the world and saw tremendous order and then concluded that there must be someone who put the world in order. So for example, if you were walking down the street and you saw a table, and on the table you saw books, a stack of books, large books at the bottom, small books at the top. Well, you basically have 2 options. Either you can say that someone came over and placed the books there, or you can walk away and say, well, they just happened randomly. So everyone would say, no, someone placed the books there. There's a great story told of Sir Isaac Newton, who was a believing Christian. He had some students who were atheists. And one day they walk in, and Sir Isaac made a beautiful working model of the universe. That's balls of wax and strings and springs and all these things. The student said, Sir Isaac, when did you make this? Sir Isaac said, I didn't make it. I just went to bed last night, and there's some wax and strings and springs just on the table. It just kind of happened by itself. Sir Isaac, things just don't happen by themselves. Whereupon he said, let your ears hear what your mouth is saying. Here you are saying that this working model of the universe could not have come to being on its own, whereas you are saying something much infinitely more complex. The universe, mankind, that did come into being through its own. How many bottles of ink have to spill on pages and pages of paper in order to create randomly a Shakespearean novel? That's what we're saying. That's what we're talking about. So it's the idea of seeing order in the world. Now, Abraham took it a little further. He turned to these people and said, okay, you believe in the moon god and the sun god, but who created the moon god and the sun god? Who's the most powerful of them all? Well, whoever the most powerful God is, that's the one you should pray to. So Abraham took something, and now this is where we're going to this idea of understanding order in the universe leads us really to our definition of God. Abraham intuited something that we understand very well here in modern times. He understood that time and space are really connected. And that if you have something in space, it begins in one place and it ends in another. Imagine for a moment you have a cup. Okay, here's the cup. As a finite being, you have 3 options with this cup. You can live nicely with the cup. Good cup, nice cup. I live with the cup. Okay. Or you could take a baseball bat and smash the cup out of existence. You live. You exist. The cup does not exist. Or what you can do is you can say, okay, nice cup. Put it down right over here. Walk away. You live your life. and the cup lives its life, right? That's what you can do. But an infinite being only has two options. You can live with the cup, a nice cup, or you can smash the cup out of existence. But to walk away and forget about the cup, an infinite being cannot do that. He doesn't have that ability to do that. An infinite being must be aware of the cup at all times. And that's why when we're trying to find God, we discuss God in terms of a creator. He created the world. A sustainer. Sustainer means he keeps creating it over and over and over again. He's involved because he's infinite. And a supervisor. Supervisor means God knows exactly what's going on at all times. This is the essence of who the Almighty is. Now, if a person were to imagine just for a few moments, what is the implication in your life? Why does that make a difference to you? How is your life enhanced, or how is your life hampered by the fact that you can know with confidence, intellectually and emotionally, that there is a creator of the universe that is not physical, is not finite, and that therefore is actively involved in your life and aware of everything you do at every moment? How does that help you? And if it doesn't help you, how does it hinder you? My name is Rabbi Wyne. You're watching Life is Great. Don't go away. We will be back with more Life is Great and the Rabbi's Inbox in just a moment. Dear Rabbi, I am a scientist who believes in God, but most of my colleagues do not. They often cite the age of the universe as a reason to not accept the Bible. How should I answer them? Okay, so let's go and let's get to answering your question exactly. All right. So let's look at the age of the universe. There's several ways of approaching this. One is be a fundamentalist. Take the Torah as its literal word. In other words, God created the world in 6 days, rested on the seventh, and that was 5,774 years ago. Oh, what do we do with fossils, dinosaurs, and science that says the age of the universe is 14 billion years old? We could say, well, listen, God created the world in such a way that you would have a test and that you would look up at the stars, and we know that star is 30 million light years away, and and we say, listen, God created it as a way so that people who don't want to believe in God can choose not to believe in God. And therefore, people who choose to believe in God, despite the scientific explanations, well, they get rewarded for their trust in God. And the people that choose to go the other way, so they miss out. And that's one approach. I actually approach it from a slightly different way. There's a fantastic book out there. It is called Genesis and the Big Bang. It's authored by Dr. Gerald Schroeder. It is recommended reading. Now, Dr. Schroeder, he happens to live in Jerusalem. He's a former MIT scientist. And he's a physicist. And he stopped and he explained the following. The first thing you have to realize is dating back all the way to the 1200s, we have a principle that you never will find a contradiction between science and Torah. If you see a contradiction between science and Torah, either you don't understand the science or you don't understand the Torah. One or the other. So how do you resolve it? Well, Dr. Schroeder explains in his book, The Genesis and the Big Bang, that if you were to take all of the matter that exists in the universe, that science has estimated exists in the universe, and the age of the universe, you would look at it's 14 billion years old. But there's a principle. There is something called the law of relativity, and that means that if you add, the greater the mass of something, the slower time moves. The slower time moves. Which means that if we were on Jupiter right now, and where the mass is so much greater, our days would seem a lot longer. They would seem a lot longer. You come down to Earth here, things would move a lot quicker because there's not as great a mass over here. All right, so in the 1200s, the Ramban, Rabbi Moses ben Nachman, he wrote a description of the creation of the universe. And he said the universe started off, everything in the universe was the size of a mustard seed, and it continued to expand. In other words, Jews have always believed in a Big Bang, and we've always believed in an expanding universe. This is a tradition that we have going all the way back to Moses at Mount Sinai just a little more than 3,300 years ago. And of course, it was published in the 1200s. It was published in other places, but most recently in the 1200s, okay, in that famous commentary over there. So what that means is that at the beginning, inasmuch as all of the matter of the universe was together, squished up like a mustard seed, time moved very slowly. And then as it would expand, so then time started speeding up. Now we know that the creation of man is on the 6th day, and we say that man, not the universe, man is 5,774 years old. Plus a couple months now, right? So that's how old mankind is, man as we know it. But Gerald Schroeder, he goes through all the calculations and he shows that if you were to look at the world through God's eyes, understanding, taking into account all of the mass of the universe that was shoved together like a mustard seed and then started spreading apart, that would account for 6 days plus another day of Shabbos plus 5,774 years. If you were to stop and look back from our time, the way we measure time right now, then you'll look back and you'll say the universe is 14 billion years old. So what perspective are you looking at it from? Are you looking at it from God's perspective at the beginning of the universe, or are you looking at it from man's perspective, talking right now? The main point to remember is never a contradiction between God and science. My name is Rabbi Wyne. I want to thank you so much for being part of the Life is Great program. I encourage you to send me questions at rabbi@therabbishow.com. And if you are in Las Vegas, then please swing by my synagogue, Young Israel Aish of Las Vegas. I promise to make you feel very at home and very comfortable. And please join me again next week at another edition of Life is Great.
Go to therabbishow.com today. Make a donation, and Rabbi Wyne will send you a free Jewish calendar for the new year, along with his personal blessings. All donations are tax deductible and help us share positive values which make the world a better place for everyone.
Thank you so much for joining me today in Life is Great. There are so many people that are benefiting from this television program, from the Rabbi Show radio program, our YouTube broadcasts, and reading my book, Life is Great. I want to thank all of you, and I want you to know that the only way we can continue to distribute and to do these programs are through your generous contributions to therabbishow.com. So I'd like to encourage you today to go to therabbishow.com and make some kind of donation. Everything is appreciated in order to help us continue to spread these positive values and enrich and enhance other people's lives. Thank you.
Want more wine? Turn your radio to AM 720 KDWN or go online to therabbishow.com to hear The Rabbi Show starting right after the news at 9 a.m.